Hey everyone, we are working to hit 1,000 subscribers and I need your help to get there. If you enjoy the content, please hit that subscribe button right now.
Yo, pause. You see that man right there? That's Jason Lee, senior advisor to the mayor of Chicago. The guy who the city's own inspector general said should be fired. The guy who allegedly dragged an alderman into a coat closet at City Hall and told him to vote the right way or lose his public safety cleanup. That guy, that man, is now the person Chicago is sending out to fight to keep the Bears in the city. Chicago sent their most controversial, most embattled, most legally questioned staffer to go toe-to-toe with Arlington Heights and Hammond, Indiana, over a multi-billion-dollar NFL stadium deal. And it gets so much wilder from there. I'm Fave. Welcome to Favs, where we do not sugarcoat anything, we do not sanitize anything, and we absolutely do not look away when the drama is this thick. Because what is happening right now in the Chicago Bears stadium saga is one of the most chaotic, most politically messy, most Chicago things that has ever happened in professional sports. And the clock is ticking. Let's get all the way into it. Let's set the stage for people who haven't been following this story, because the full context makes every new development hit even harder. The Chicago Bears have played at Soldier Field on Chicago's lakefront since 1971. It is one of the most iconic addresses in all of professional football, and they have been trying, desperately, painfully, unsuccessfully, to build a new stadium for years. According to the Chicago Sun-Times, the Bears still owe somewhere between $500 and $600 million on the 2002 to 2003 Soldier Field renovation bonds. So not only do they play in a stadium that the NFL has said is among the smallest and least revenue-generating in the league, they're still paying off debt for a renovation to a building they don't even own. The city of Chicago owns Soldier Field. The Bears are tenants? And Fave's opinion? You cannot build a modern NFL dynasty with a tenant's mentality. You need to own your house. So the Bears bought a solution. In February of 2023, according to multiple outlets including WGN-TV, the Bears purchased the former Arlington International Racecourse in Arlington Heights, Illinois, a 326-acre property for just under $200 million. They own it outright, and for a while it looked like that was going to be the home of the new Bears Stadium. Clean story, suburban Chicago, big land, fresh start. Except then, Illinois started doing what Illinois does best. Nothing, slowly, while everyone argues about who gets the credit and who takes the blame. Here is where Indiana entered the chat and entered it hard. As reported by the Northwest Indiana Times and confirmed across multiple outlets, the Indiana State Legislature passed Senate Enrolled Act 27 by a vote of 45-4 in the Senate and 95-4 in the House. Numbers that aren't close to a negotiation. They're a declaration. Governor Mike Braun signed it into law immediately. Indiana's package for the Bears included up to $1 billion in state-backed financial support, using taxes on hotels, restaurants, and event tickets at the stadium itself. And on top of that, according to Lakeshore Public Media, Indiana unlocked an additional $700 million for infrastructure upgrades through an updated lease on the Indiana Toll Road, allowing its private operator to raise tolls twice a year to generate that funding. Let me say that again more slowly so it sinks in. Indiana already passed the law. Indiana already signed the law. Indiana already has the money identified. And the Bears own a site at Wolf Lake in Hammond that is already in the due diligence phase. Meanwhile, Illinois is still arguing about a bill in the Senate that needs to pass before May 31st. And by the way, just to add some color to how seriously Indiana is taking this, as reported by Yardbarker, Hammond Mayor Thomas McDermott has been the public face of Indiana's pitch, aggressively courting the franchise and presenting Wolf Lake as a ready-made destination. He has a governor behind him, a unanimous committee vote, a signed law, and a prepared site. Fave's translation of that situation: Indiana came to the table dressed for a wedding. Illinois is still looking for its car keys. Now, enter Jason Lee, stage left, carrying a bag of talking points and a reputation that would make most PR departments sweat. According to the Chicago Sun-Times, this past week, Lee came out publicly insisting that Chicago still has a chance to keep the Bears and tried to poke holes in both the Arlington Heights and Hammond proposals. On Arlington Heights, Lee argued that even if the Illinois Senate passes the mega projects bill and the infrastructure funding comes through, building a dome stadium there is still not a sure thing because of financing questions. On Hammond, he pointed to lower population density and less overall economic activity around the Wolf Lake site as reasons to be skeptical. And while, if we're being charitable, some of those observations are technically true, both sites have real challenges. The problem with Jason Lee making these arguments is the opium-level potent irony of a man whose own city hasn't gotten a deal done in 3 years being the one to point out other people's problems. The Bears bought Arlington Heights in 2023. We are now in 2026. The Bears are still waiting on Illinois. Fave's personal commentary? You don't get to show up late to the restaurant, take the last seat at the table, and then complain about the menu. And here's what makes Lee's argument even weaker in real time. A Bears spokesperson responded directly to Lee's comments as reported by the Chicago Sun-Times, by essentially dismissing the entire premise. The team said, and this is a direct paraphrase from the Sun-Times report, that there are only 2 viable locations under consideration, Arlington Heights and Hammond. Period. Full stop. A decision is expected between those 2 by late spring or early summer. Chicago is not on that list. Chicago is not a third option. Chicago is a memory in this process. And the Bears made sure to communicate that loudly and publicly the same day Lee was out there suggesting Chicago wasn't out of the running. Now here's where we need to talk about who Jason Lee actually is, because this isn't a guy who just appeared on the scene. His background matters enormously to understanding why his involvement in the stadium narrative is so explosive. As reported by CBS Chicago, ABC7, NBC Chicago, and the Chicago Sun-Times, the city's inspector general, Deborah Witzberg, recommended that Mayor Brandon Johnson fired Jason Lee last October after a more than 17-month investigation into whether Lee engaged in misconduct. What was the allegation? According to Alderman Bill Conway of Chicago's 34th Ward, Lee took him into a copy room, literally a coat closet behind city council chambers, and offered him a deal. Conway says Lee told him the city would help clean up a homeless encampment that had become an open-air drug market and crime hotspot in Conway's ward, but only if Conway voted to raise the real estate transfer tax and voted to end the tipped minimum wage. When Conway didn't play ball, according to his account, the promised cleanup was canceled. As Conway himself told reporters, according to WGN-TV, the mayor's office tried to extort his vote in exchange for basic public safety services. The Inspector General's office launched an investigation, and Jason Lee, the right-hand man of the mayor of Chicago, a man earning $195,000 a year in taxpayer money, refused to cooperate. He wouldn't answer the written questions sent to him. He didn't respond to repeated outreach. And when the IG finally sent her termination recommendation to Mayor Johnson, Johnson said no. He refused to fire Lee, kept him on staff, kept him in the building, kept him at that $195,000 salary. As Witzberg put it at her press conference, according to WTTW, a government that is accountable to the governed cannot tolerate a refusal of scrutiny. And yet, here we are. But wait, because it gets worse. It always gets worse in Chicago. According to the Chicago Sun-Times, this past March, Jason Lee was one of the 2 senior officials summoned to fire Deputy Mayor for Community Safety Garion Gatewood, the man who ran the very community safety program Mayor Johnson publicly credited with achieving historic drops in violent crime in Chicago. Gatewood was called into a meeting with Lee, and the mayor's chief of staff told the administration was moving in a different direction and let go. And what did Gatewood do? He filed a formal complaint with the Inspector General's office, with sources telling the Sun-Times that the complaint accuses Lee and the chief of staff of improper interference in City Hall's contracting process. So, the man who allegedly shook down an alderman for his vote was now allegedly interfering in city contracts and helping fire the guy who reduced violent crime. And Mayor Johnson stood by him through all of it, every single time. That's the person Chicago has sent to represent its interests in the Bears stadium conversation. Fave's reaction? This is not a PR strategy. This is a dumpster fire wearing a suit. Now, let's take a moment to be fair to the actual substance of the stadium debate, because the Bears' situation in Illinois is genuinely complicated, and not all of the blame falls on the city. The Mega Projects Bill, officially Illinois House Bill 910, is the key piece of legislation that would allow the Bears to negotiate long-term discounted property tax payments rather than facing what could become an astronomical annual property tax bill in Arlington Heights. According to Capital News Illinois, if no pilot legislation is passed and the Bears build there, their annual property tax bill could exceed $100 million and potentially climb north of $200 million. For context, the highest known stadium property payment in the entire country at SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles is under $9 million annually. No franchise in any sport is paying $100 to $200 million in property taxes on a stadium. That's not a negotiation. That's a non-starter. So the bill does matter. The bill is real. The need is legitimate. But here's the problem. That bill passed the Illinois House by a vote of 78 to 32 in late April, and the Bears' own statement in response said, per ABC 7 Chicago, that they welcomed the progress but that additional amendments were still necessary to make the Arlington Heights site feasible. So even after the House passed the bill, the Bears said it still wasn't enough, and now it sits in the Illinois Senate, which has until May 31 to act. That is the hard deadline. According to Capitol News Illinois, Senate negotiators are still haggling over the property tax relief mechanism, which the Bears oppose in its current form. As Illinois State Senator Bill Cunningham told reporters, according to the Chicago Sun-Times, lawmakers want to make the property tax relief provision more meaningful, but nobody can agree on how to do it. And while all of that gets sorted out, Indiana's signed law is sitting on the table next to a pen. Here's the political layer that is absolutely suffocating this whole process. And it's important to understand because it explains why nothing gets done in Illinois on time. As reported by WBEZ Chicago, no Chicago legislator wants to be the one who let the Bears leave. That's an obvious political liability. But at the same time, the progressive wing of the Democratic supermajority is deeply skeptical of handing hundreds of millions in tax breaks to a franchise worth nearly $9 billion, while everyday residents are struggling with rising costs. Governor Pritzker doesn't want to be remembered as the guy who lost the Bears either. But he also doesn't want to be seen as handing a billionaire sports franchise a massive public subsidy. And Mayor Brandon Johnson? He is caught in the worst possible position, which is simultaneously trying to block the Arlington Heights legislation, because it benefits a suburban project outside his city, while also not wanting the political legacy of losing the franchise to Indiana. Johnson called the megaprojects bill short-sighted, according to Yardbarker. Then he drove to Springfield to lobby for it anyway. If there's a more perfectly Chicago political contradiction than that, I haven't heard it. And Pritzker's office has not been particularly kind about the mayor's involvement either. According to the original transcript driving this story, J.B. Pritzker's office is maneuvering by stating that after years of shifting proposals, the mayor's office still has not presented a concrete plan that could actually pass the General Assembly with support from the Bears. Years of shifting proposals. And Jason Lee's contribution to this moment is going on record to poke holes in the two sites that the Bears, the NFL, and the state of Indiana have already identified as the actual options. That is not problem solving. That is noise. Fave is not impressed. Let me give you the full picture of where things stand right now, because despite all the noise, this story is actually approaching a moment of truth. As reported by Yardbarker, Bears president Kevin Warren has said the team will choose between Arlington Heights and Hammond by late spring or early summer. The NFL Stadium Committee has already met with the Bears and officially taken Chicago off the table as a viable option. Illinois has until May 31. That's it. That's the runway. And if the Senate doesn't pass a version of the megaprojects bill that the Bears can actually accept, the leverage shifts entirely to Indiana. According to Sports Mockery, the underlying theory of why the Bears haven't already pulled the trigger on Indiana is actually pretty straightforward. The Bears prefer Arlington Heights. The McCaskey family, who own the franchise, want to stay in the greater Chicago metropolitan area. The fan base is there. The infrastructure is there. The density is there. Hammond, according to the analysis from Sports Mockery, is being used primarily as leverage, as the threat that keeps Illinois lawmakers moving. The Bears are squeezing Indiana for everything they can in order to make the Illinois deal happen. But leverage only works until it doesn't. At some point, if Illinois keeps stalling and the Senate doesn't deliver, the Bears have to either call Indiana's bluff, which means actually going to Indiana, or fold and accept a bad Illinois deal which the NFL's owners would almost certainly reject. According to ABC 7 Chicago's coverage of the deal, a poll conducted by Suffolk University found 56% of respondents would prefer the team in Arlington Heights, compared to only 10% favoring Indiana. That means the political pressure from Bears fans is overwhelmingly on the side of Illinois getting this done. The problem is, political pressure and legislative action are not the same thing, especially in Springfield. Here's my final take on all of this, and I want you to hear me clearly before I let you go. What we are watching is a franchise with a century-plus of history in Chicago being failed by the very political system that is supposed to serve the people of that city. The Bears are not the victims here. They are a $9 billion enterprise with more leverage than any sports franchise has in this situation. But the fans are the ones who deserve better than this. The people who've been going to Bears games through decade after decade of mediocrity, through bad drafts, through heartbreak, through freezing cold at Soldier Field while every other franchise in the league was building modern palaces. They deserve leadership in City Hall that can get deals done, not advisors who are dodging Inspector General investigations while moonlighting as stadium critics. Jason Lee showing up to talk smack about Hammond while his own boss still can't produce a concrete legislative plan is one of the most Chicago things that has ever happened. And by Chicago, I mean the Chicago of political machines and coat room deals. And the rules don't apply to my guy. That's Chicago. Indiana has a signed law. Indiana has committed funding. Indiana has a ready site. And the Illinois Senate has until May 31. That is less than 2 weeks from today. Every day that Jason Lee spends attacking other cities' plans instead of presenting a real Chicago plan is another day the Bears get closer to a press conference in Hammond. The Bears want Arlington Heights. Illinois lawmakers know what they need to do. And somewhere in City Hall, a man who the Inspector General recommended be fired is out here spinning narratives. That's where we are. History will record this moment. And Fave's verdict? Chicago is about to lose a franchise it didn't deserve to lose. Not because the deal was impossible, but because nobody in power wanted to be the one to do the work. All right, if you made it to the end of this one, you're a real one, and you already know what time it is. Smash that like button, not a soft tap. I mean, you give it everything you've got, because this story deserves your energy. Drop in the comments, do you think the Bears are going to Illinois or Indiana? And do you think Jason Lee has any business being the face of Chicago's last-ditch pitch? I want the debate in the comments section. Bears fans, Chicago politics followers, Indiana people, all of you get in there right now. And if you are not yet subscribed to Favs, what are you even doing? This is where the no-filter, no corporate spin sports and politics stories live. Hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, and we will see you in the next one. Let's go.